So starting the test drive for the Nautilus, I always felt like this was in its own kind of realm. It's similar to the Edge, but just the way it looks, the space inside, it feels like it should be in between an Escape and an Edge in terms of a Lincoln counterpart. And with the Edge, that's always been in a realm of its own as well, because if you want to compare it to, let's say, a Chevy Equinox or a Chevy Traverse, I feel like it's right in between those two, just with how it's made. It seems almost like the Audi Q8 is, where it's just out there, and people who just want a two-row SUV with space, that's where you go, as opposed to going to a smaller one, like maybe a Q5 if you want an Audi. So the Nautilus, to me, it has a niche market. Now you can compare it to, let's say, the Lexus RX or maybe a Honda Passport, something like that. I wouldn't even go that big, maybe a CRV, but with a $58,000 price tag, it's hard to find its true competitor, because vehicles around its size usually are not that much money unless it is in the luxury brand. But this is basically the luxury Ford Edge counterpart. But anyways, it rides like it should. The ride is very luxurious, very smooth. All the material in here looks good, feels good. And the push button shifter here, I wasn't really sure about, because I've driven several Lincolns, but I like how this is set up here. My only issue is kind of everything is close together, but you should be paying attention when you're using the shifter anyway. But as opposed to having a floor shifter where I can just, I know, park, reverse, neutral, drive, I have to hit, like, go over here, make sure I'm not accidentally hitting reverse instead of neutral, whatever. But not really that big of a deal. There's the auto stop. Now the sport mode is pretty peppy. I'm surprised I don't have a knob of some sort to kind of go between eco, sport, and a slippery or whatever, but this is a two-wheel drive vehicle, so not really a lot of use in having different conditions when you're only having two wheels, I guess. But pretty quiet in the cabin. It just sounds quite marvelous in here, let me say that. Pretty impressed all the way around. And I tested out the Revel sound system. The Revel sound system is pretty phenomenal. Now, of course, as you go into the Navigator and you get that Pro sound system, has more speakers, a subwoofer, all that, that sounds better than the system. But compared to a base Escape system, this is pretty impressive. Now in sport mode, it gets a bit peppier. Now, of course, to feel the full effect of this 2-liter turbo, you pretty much have to put your foot down into it, which I don't want to necessarily do now. But it does have quite a bit of power. And I'll try and exercise that as I get on the interstate here momentarily. So I'm going to give it some throttle getting on the interstate here as soon as I can. But of course, in the sport mode, it definitely tends to rev hot as it's getting ready to do a pull of some sorts. So pretty good power there. And the ride is actually quite nice. And I like that even with the 1.0, we do get the lane centering, we get the adaptive cruise control. Of course, it's not gonna be like Blue Cruise or anything like that. You're supposed to keep your hands on the steering wheel, but as you can see, that's not a necessity. But wind noise in here is very, very good. I don't know if you all heard all the wind that was going on earlier when I was reviewing the outside of the vehicle, or before I drove it, I should say. But it was quite windy outside, and I am not getting any of that for the most part in here. But in terms of competition, like I said, it's even for the Cadillac, I just feel like it would be an XT5 competitor, but just how low slung and sleek it is, it seems smaller, even though the interior says otherwise. But comparing that to an XT4, an XT5, whatever it is, I'm actually surprised the 2-liter pushes this so well without having to get a bigger engine or even a V6. So $60,000, you be the judge of whether you want to pay that for a Lincoln Nautilus, but this will bring me to the end of my review of this Lincoln Nautilus Reserve.